Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to Cyber Sensei, the definitive podcast for cybersecurity educators, brought to you by Cyberbit. For most of you on this session, welcome back. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. My name is Sharon Rosenman. I'm the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer at Cyberbit. I'm joined as always by Mr. Adam Bricker. Hello, Adam.
Hello.
It's to be with you once again. It's a pleasure. And I'd love to welcome our guest speaker for today, Mr. Pete Herzog, who defined himself as follows: an old school security analyst who was an adjunct professor at 2 universities in a former life, and the creator of Hacker Highschool, a unique cybersecurity training for teens. Hi, Pete.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and we'll allow you to introduce yourself in more depth later on and tell us a little bit about your story. Quick reminder for those of us who are here live, this is a live session. We'll be opening up the chat for questions after about 30 minutes into this session. So all you need to do is raise your hand. We will unmute you, and if you'd like to ask a question live, you're more than welcome to do it. If not, you are welcome to send your questions anytime in the Q&A section of this chat, and we'll make sure to answer them within the Q&A session or live. The session is recorded, and a lot of you have asked us about that. It is recorded. It will be available on all the leading podcast platforms later on, and we will be sharing it on our LinkedIn profile, so you can always get it up there. With that out of the way, Adam, would you like to present today's topic and the guest?
Thanks, Sharon. As our audience may remember, our focus, our goal is to provide you tangible, tactical things that you could take into your cyber programs today. So you may remember we've interviewed people who had critical thinking skills and the attacker's advantage and how to think like the attacker. We've had people that talked about how to discuss and develop a finishing school for cybersecurity, those hands-on expertise and skills that a lot of programs aren't able to provide. We've had those that talked about what they're looking for educators and how to build a program like this. And today, we're joined by Pete Herzog, who I've known here for a few years now, and he's quite a rare talent. Pete's a man, he's a true polymath in the area of cybersecurity. And I know we hear that term, often, but he's gifted in the expert of working at the trenches and on the leading edge of some of today's cybersecurity, IT security challenges, the IT arms race in cybersecurity. He's an AI startup co-founder. He's a coach and so much more. Pete, 20 years ago, founded what we're going to talk a little bit about today called Hacker Highschool. He teaches and his team for NATO forces and another startup that he had, another gift to the cybersecurity field over 20 years ago. He was the founder of what I feel is an underutilized framework for understanding and maturing your cybersecurity posture, and that's the OSTEM, the Open Source Security Testing Methodology, and ISACOM. So I hope the audience will look those up, and Pete will talk a little bit more about us. And there's so many things we could talk with Pete about today. But today I just want to value everybody's time and focus on just two things. One area, and these both are areas Pete's already passionate about. So one of them is how to help high school education, how to attract students into this field, curriculum programs that whether you're listening to this podcast at a university, a program you could take for super low cost, but truly proven methodology and curriculum to take into your local high schools. And then the other topic is areas of cybersecurity specific critical thinking exercises that Pete and his team have developed again over the last 20 years. And I will start, Pete, are you joining us from Barcelona today? Your home?
I am. Well, I'm just outside of Barcelona near the foothills of the mountains. But yeah, I'm not a city person anymore. Born in Brooklyn, I'm done with city. So
awesome. Well, I look forward to getting back to my ranch in Colorado next week. I was joking with Sharon as we started this podcast. Each of the last four, I've been on 4 different continents. So Africa, Asia, and now I'm in Europe. So Pete, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Let me start off with this question about engaging young audiences. And I'll euphemistically say sort of the high school age. You founded Hacker High School. What did you found was the problem you were trying to address? And what have you found helps engage students to come into this career of cybersecurity, IT security?
So kind of interesting is that when we founded Hacker High School, this was back in 2003, most kids did not have phones. So, right? They had no mobile phones. Most of them that were going online, it was mostly to download music, there were YouTube, things like that. There wasn't that much for them to do online, flash games, things like that. And what ended up happening was we have a certification program, ISACOM, the organization we had started, that I started with my wife, in order to research cybersecurity. We provided then certification from the OSTEM. And we were working with La Salle University in Barcelona and sort of building out the curriculum and things like that. And one day I was heading down there because they were actually hosting our Hacker High School servers there, which I think was probably one of the first online labs that was available to people. And we were building it there, and they were giving us the network to do it. And I was heading there, and we were going over some of the grades from the class. And I said, this is amazing. You know, the young people here are doing so well. They're scoring so high on these certifications. And I wonder if it's because they have no baggage. They have nothing to unlearn. Because remember, we were also teaching this professionally at the same time. So there was a lot of professionals who had 5-10 years experience, and they weren't scoring nearly as well. And now these certifications are hands-on, right? So you actually have to, you're testing against live servers and coming back with responses that you have to enter in. And I said, I wonder how young we can get before we get perfect scores, you know, like if it would only get better as we get younger. And we thought, actually, you know, and that's when Jaume, who's he's still on our board. He was one of the people we were working there. Now I think he's head of the networking department or the IT department. But back then we were talking, and he said, well, you know, La Salle also has high schools. And I thought, this is interesting. And that's sort of, we came up then with plan on how to do it. And we had these huge dreams. And we thought, we're going to teach people, young people, to be cyber savvy, not so much just for cyber, I would say, but because we saw that people's lives were shifting online. And now remember, this even predates social media. So we saw that that people were spending more and more time online, even though they still had to dial up in some places. And we thought that this was only going to become more of a thing, and it was better if they had these skills. Of course, in those years, everything else exploded and everything else happened. But it was really an idea of teaching them this sort of self-protection and how to research things online. Like there was no clear problems like there are today, you know?
So you taught them how to think. And so especially those that are at a high school or listening to this podcast, or those at a college, just give us the 90-second summary. What is Hacker High School today?
So Hacker High School today is a series of lessons that we provide for free online. And there's colleges who use them. They're really good. They are based on research from the OSTEM, written by multiple security experts, professionals in the field. They're written for teenagers, specifically for anyone, actually the teenage mind, you could say. So basically anyone probably 25 and younger would get it. It's based on teaching by narrative. So there's stories, there's multiple levels to it, multiple challenges. The idea is to take them through most of the foundational stuff that they need to know in networking and security. And then, of course, any of the newer technologies as they come up, how to protect themselves, how to secure things, how to attack things. We basically teach them full rounded course so that they actually could come out, and I would say become junior SOC analysts when they graduate, when they leave the classes. And again, this is I think right now there's 14 lessons and more in development, and we just put them out there. We also have we also hook them up then with online training that they can do for practice and things like that. We still have our old cyber range from 2003 still running. Unfortunately, it's completely maxed out, so we can't give new accounts to it. But yeah, we just support schools on this. We have books now because a lot of schools didn't like printing the PDFs. So we do have books that we sell pretty
You have
much
a
at
live
cost.
instructor element to it as well that they can subscribe to as well, right?
Yeah, we did. So we had a live instructor element, and what we found was time zones was a huge issue. So we ended up switching over to an AI instructor, actually. But we still have tutoring or help where once a week for a couple of hours we have somebody live that anybody could drop into and talk and ask questions. So that we still have.
Super low cost, but meticulously researched. I mean, when I was introducing it in North Carolina, and then I look forward to doing it in Colorado when I get back, is you have the stories, you have the gaming, you have these critical thinking exercises that students are really learning to solve problems. Can you give an example of one of those for the audience here?
Yeah, sure. So obviously trying to keep young people engaged is hard. It's really hard, especially since a lot of them think I'm not going to go into cybersecurity. I'm going to be a doctor, lawyer, window washer, whatever they're YouTuber. I don't know. Same thing sometimes. Influencer is another one, right? So they don't need this, but the problem here is that cybersecurity is so integrated into their lives. It's like knowing personal finance these days. You kind of have to be able to protect yourself online and know what you're doing. So we want them to be there. We want them to be engaged because unfortunately, if you look at this holistically, every person out there who falls to an attacker, their system then becomes a bot or becomes a new launching point. So it makes it infinitely harder. Each person who falls because they don't know cybersecurity just builds the other person's army, the attacker's army, that much more. So it's so important that we get people understanding this and get them through this because everybody is online and they're all doing things online. So we try to keep them in seats and keep them engaged, and depending on the audience. So we have this, the cup and string, telephone thing. So we might do exercises like that where they do that and we explain to them and we go through controls and say, okay, how would you secure this communication? How would you attack this communication? And we let them talk about it. And of course, a big foundation of this is understanding how it even works. Why does sound travel over the line? So there has to be an understanding of how the technology works in order to secure it, because you cannot secure something that you don't know its operations. And that's another one. We've done things where we've taken them outside for a summer course we did in Hawaii with Hacker High School, where our flagship school was. We had them take old hard drives, smash them apart, and then we had an expert come in and see if they could read anything still off the smashed drives. But we also do a lot of exercises with them. Like one of the big ones is Jack of all trades, which we also use for professionals. But this gives them a very structured idea of how security analysis works. So, for example, Jack of all trades, the big one is the light bulb exercise. You walk into a room, there's a light switch on the wall, there's a light bulb hanging from the ceiling. List 10 ways to shut off that light. And the idea is here to get them to think critically, to think bigger. And then, of course, as we go through this exercise, and pretty much everyone, professionals and kids alike, mostly think of destroying things. Break the bulb, break the switch, like it's a Star Wars movie, right? You can just shoot the switch and then it just blows up the bulb or something. But this is the idea that they think about breaking, and then you start bringing them through and teaching them analysis techniques like the 4-point process and say, okay, we could break this down to 4 things. One of them is emanations. What emanations is it giving off? Well, it's a light bulb, it's giving off light. So what can we do to stop that? Well, we can cover it. Okay, that's one way of blocking the emanations, and now the light is off. So we can go through these techniques with them, and then we go through, so you have the 4-point process where we go through those 4 points, then we go through channels. Channels are different aspects of affecting security that require completely different tools, like, for example, wireless versus data networks versus AI versus web applications or just applications. There are all different techniques, different things that you need to do in order to secure them or to test their security. So we give them channels and we say, okay, how does that affect? So now just you're not just knocking out the light bulb, you can actually just block a channel. So how do you, the human channel, for example, and well, we could just convince everybody that the light is off. And so it's really about getting them to think bigger and give them a structured way of working at this. But that really engages them. They like that. They really like hands-on, anything that you can do hands-on, especially if you can bring an expert in who can show them the wizardry, the magic of it. Think about it. We called it Hacker High School for two reasons. One, because we want young people to learn like hackers do, which is hands-on, try new things, gain skills, make mistakes. Hacking is learning, sort of thing. And the other is, calling it Hacker High School is better than calling it, cybersecurity, privacy, and in education. Like they're going to fall asleep. So you need to give it a little bit of pizzazz, right? So they're going to take Hacker High School, and hopefully try to capture the magic.
Well, thank you for sharing. And for those listening to this, I hope, Shahar, you'll put a link in the show notes here that people can get access to find out it. But it's a super low cost, very well done, engaging thing for the students, and you can jump right into it. And you yourself don't need to be a cybersecurity expert, right, Pete? But of course, it helps.
Is that something that we've got most of the audience here as educators running programs today? So that's some of them are students. That's something that they can talk to you and actually implement in the program. How does that work?
They don't even have to talk to me. They can just download the lessons, which is what most people do. We don't track it. It's all out there for free. They can grab it. They can do it. They can do parts of it. Yeah. We do have a certification exam that's going online, and they can choose to do that, and it's all hands off from us. And the thing is that when we started this, we had this grand idea that we were going to teach all these teachers and professors, and we even had a teacher class, and nobody cared and nobody showed up. Really, we got 10 people to show up, and they weren't interested. And I get it. Teachers have a lot of work on top of it, and to learn something new and do this more, which in that case back then they didn't really see a real need for it. So we ended up rewriting all the lessons so that the students teach themselves and each other, which means now any school can implement it and just proctor the students. And what we see is that the teachers learn along with the students then.
And that's something that you can implement in a high school program, but also in a undergrad or bachelor's program. You think that would also be appropriate?
Yeah, sure. That's the thing. We say it's 12 to 20, but we find up until 25. And the thing is that, in colleges, it works out great. Sure, there's some stories in there that might seem a little childish because of the range and the narrative, but you don't have to teach those stories. You don't have to make them read it. And it's really up to them. We teach military boot camp soldiers who need to know basic foundation for before they go out in the field, not to send out pictures to Instagram with their field location on it, things like that. But we actually go through, and they go through a modified version of Hacker High School course where we take the kids' stories out of it. But it's basically the same thing, because remember that most boot camps, most new soldiers are between 18 and 20.
Yeah. And you have the links. We've just posted them in the chat. So if any of you is interested, you have them right here.
So at the opposite end of the spectrum, we've talked a lot about the critical thinking and these, other non-technical skills that students need to learn. You've talked about the exercises for critically thinking, how to develop the technical skills. But at the opposite end, you've got an interesting perspective and a really broad background in the use of artificial intelligence. You mentioned about an AI instructor, and I know you developed this tool called Rabbit Hole, but just kind of at the broad level, how do you think about artificial intelligence and cybersecurity and IT security today? And as you think about that, what advice would you give our audience of educators?
Well, I love AI, and when it takes over the world, I want this to be on record. Okay.
So you're not
the AI overlords. Okay. Yes. Okay. Now that's out of the way. I think AI is a huge change to everything. I think it can bring about really wonderful things. And I like to think of it sort of like the field of art when cameras came, and a lot of people said for a long time cameras aren't art, it's not the same as painting, drawing, and it's not. It's different, but it's still a tool, and you can still take good pictures or bad pictures depending on whether or not you're an artist. And I think AI too is a great tool, and we need to actually harness it and start looking at the things that it can do well for us, that it can answer some questions, that it can help with helping us break down and organize some of our skills. And I mean, there's non-technical skills that we definitely do teach. And I think AI helps with that. On the other hand, letting AI unravel mysteries, do their research, write their reports, it's all great. It can help them do analysis specifically, because that's something they kind of have to do on their feet. And they have to take a lot of different sensory input and put it together. I mean, the AI that the world has access to doesn't really have interactive capabilities with the outside world, the things that we're testing. And while we can actually take some of our scans or some of our work and actually put it into the AI and ask it what it thinks, it's not the same as getting the real world viewpoint of what you see. It just can't do that. It doesn't have that kind of common sense to it, that it knows up is up, down is down. It just knows how to put the right words together to give the right answers to specific questions. So I absolutely think that AI should be part of it. We use it. We actually put all of the Hacker High School materials into our AI rabbit hole. It's one of the uses for it. And we had built this before ChatGPT became a thing. And of course, we still use it now. And we've integrated some of ChatGPT into it. But we did it because there was no way. When we did it, we wanted, we just didn't have access to something like that. It just didn't exist. So now I think it's pretty powerful. Students can interact with it, can ask questions specifically about the lessons.
Audience a summary of what Rabbit Hole is and why you reuse the information it's using to learn from.
Sure. So Rabbit Hole is an AI project program that we built with Irvin AI. It's a company that I co-founded with 4 others, and this product came about like 4 years ago, so long before anything else. And what we ended up doing was trying to figure out how we can give it documents. It reads the documents, understands the documents, and then allows you to ask questions about those documents. And this was good for a lot of things, but one of the big things I see now is privacy, right? So I can give all my internal documents to it because only I see it, only my AI has access to it. It's sort of a personal thing then. And we ended up using it then for Hacker High School because we needed to give it a large body of knowledge for it to read, to test it. And that was one of the few large bodies of knowledge we had, that and the OSTEM. So we started feeding it with that and sort of, now it's algorithmic, right? It's not machine learning. It uses graphs. So it's not like we have to train it on it. But we did tweak it with it to see how it answers. And that's what this does. It basically takes documents, it reads the documents. Now it also takes videos and can transcribe them and audios and things. But so it takes media, it knows what it's there, and then you can ask questions about it. And we've integrated also ChatGPT into some of it if you want it, so that it can give more full questions and allow for prompts and things. But basically keeps people restricted to those documents. So you don't want them, and this is important in a lot of places, like we're talking to pharma companies, for example, where they don't want just anybody to answer the question about the drug. They want to give the proper dosage that they state is in their documentation. It's the same thing here. You also don't want kids going on YouTube, learning some glitch or hack or something that could do damage. So you want to keep them restricted to the videos and the documents that are provided. And that's what Rabbit Hole does. And it allows them then to go through concepts. That's what a rabbit hole is, right? So they can grab onto a concept that they like I don't know, wireless hacking. And then they can read everything about it throughout all the documents that are provided, and get a real world view of it, and get to understand it really deeply. And yeah, it's something that interests them, which then they can then broaden from there. So that's what Rabbit Hole is.
Well, I'm learning from you. I'm giving a presentation at a conference here, about 100 leaders from 60 different countries that work in surveillance states and others. And one of the topics they asked me to present on was the use of ChatGPT, these other large language model tools, and how they should and shouldn't use them. I call them rules of officially tolerated conduct. So pray for me so that I can honor them in their time. But it's been a lot of research, a lot of learning for me on that as well, including, of course, how the bad guys, as we say, are leveraging these tools now to develop more sophisticated phishing attacks, whale attacks, even network vulnerabilities. But let me come back to a topic you were starting with about how to help assess, or how to help students think more clearly about cybersecurity and these patterns and the 4 points that you mentioned, the channels and stuff. How do you assess whether they're learning? How do you assess a student's ability to grow with these concepts and skills?
That is hard. We do normal quizzes, exams, things like that. But what we find really is how engaged they are. We give them assignments, projects, see how they take it, how they behave with the project itself, because that's really what it comes down to, is engagement. So, for example, one of the first projects we give them when we teach a Hacker High School class, so there's two things that they start on right away. One is come up with a hacker name for themselves, and two, create 3 or 4 social media accounts on different social media platforms that has no way any kind of has anything to do with any of their emails, phone, anything that they are or who they are in real life for those for that hacker name. And this kind of challenge, for one, it really helps them understand how hard doing some of this stuff is, or sometimes how easy, depending on what it is. Again, how much of a victim they could be in this regard, and really grabbing their attention and seeing how they complete it, how fast they complete it, how far they take it. Because yes, you can give exams and they can pass, fail, but that doesn't really mean anything in the field. I mean, I know a lot of security people with lots of certificates and great grades, and some are instructors at big organizations or universities. And they don't know squat about real world cybersecurity. They just are missing a huge part of how to apply it properly. They're missing the analysis. They're missing the practical part. And so really what we want to engage them with is something that you can't really measure in an exam. I mean, especially in the world of AI, where they can just ask the AI for the answers. You need them to be able to do something, to be able to inspect, to audit, to analyze. And it's how they engage is what matters.
I've been trying to do a better job myself of ingratiating and taking advantage of leading practices in critical thinking and how to help students think. And I came across something I would advocate the audience listen to or read. Gary Klein was interviewed on the Knowledge Project, maybe 9 months ago. And I'm kind of slow, so I finally got around to his book called Streetlights and Shadows. And what was really impressive in this book is he gives 10 classic, well-structured, all good ways that people make decisions and solve problems. And then he says, but in today's world of complex versus complexity, world of even wicked problems, as the social engineers would say, he says, but here's the corollary to that. And as you were thinking about that, I actually brought one up here. He said, to make sense of a situation, we draw inferences from the data. That makes sense, right? Inferences of data. But here's his replacement thought. We make sense of data by fitting them into stories and other frames, but the reverse also happened. Our frames determine what counts as data. And the more I thought about that, the deeper, and I thought it started with my own paradigms, the mistakes that I've made trying to critically think through the cyber challenges that I deal with around the world. But again, Gary Klein, his book on streetlights and shadows is a critical thinking exercise, and I found it helpful in this field where it's a probabilistic field. We don't actually get the endorphin release by knowing exactly that we got it right, because there still may be some things we don't know. Anyway, Pete, the use of artificial intelligence.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we hear loud and clear.
Pete.
Okay, because my computer completely froze now, and I can't move the mouse. I can't do anything, so I'm just hoping that it's still working. Sorry about that.
Keep going. We see you and we hear you. All good.
I hacked into your machine just to see if
Great.
But you noticed.
I just updated my machine last week. Unfortunately, I moved to vanilla OS. I wanted to try it as a Linux. I love trying new flavors of Linux, and it's still a little buggy. So apologize.
You talked about the technology, and even what I think your team built what might have been the first range, quote unquote, over 20 years ago, Asala and others. And now you think about the cost-effective way to help students get hands-on experience with the technology they're going to see, not compromising the critical thinking exercises you had, but what is your advice for the audience today about the tools they would use, the ranges they would use today versus what you've learned along the way?
Yeah, and if you could describe your range a little bit, that would be interesting to see. I know I got a couple of questions on that, by the way. I hope we still have Pete. You there?
So our range back in 2003 used, okay. I mean, ours was just multiple instances of VM with 5 NICs in it. And we maxed it with all the RAM we could possibly fit in it at the time. But I tell you, it was so much work, and it still is. I mean, now we have
oh, sorry, I think we've lost him.
Yeah, let's wait. We can sing a song in the meanwhile, but in the meanwhile, if you've got some questions, this is the time to type them in, and we'll let Pete maybe get his connection a little bit better. Pete, if you can still hear us or get closer to your router, that'll be amazing. But in the meanwhile, if any of you have any questions, I've got a few questions on AI, on hacking, and a couple more. We'll wait just another minute or so for Pete, and apologies for this.
Yeah, I'd be interested for the audience listening, the questions they have about the tools that they use for hands-on experience, what questions they might have for Pete, because he has seen the range. He has custom built ranges. He's custom built individual labs. He's done the paper exercises that also get at the critical thinking. And as you mentioned, the paper cup and string and stuff. And he's also had access to some of the most sophisticated ranges out there. So I'm keen for his counsel. The other thing is the audience, when you look at Hacker Highschool and Rabbit Hole and ISACOM and OSTEM, what I really would challenge those of you who are building and deploying cybersecurity curriculum, look at the methodology. What I've referred to before in this podcast is the mental models, the lenses through which people look at cybersecurity. As those of you who are educators probably know, the sort of midlife crisis in a cybersecurity professional's career is pretty profound. And a lot of it is because they don't know how to think through getting the basics right. They don't know how to think through bringing people along for the journey, the human dimensions of change, including the executives around you that are a part of your, your audience that you need to serve. And they get overwhelmed with all the things that they think they should be doing, but there's only time to do so much. And if you don't have the basics down and understanding, IT asset management, and if you look at even the latest results that came out today from CISA and stuff, what was it, 32% were just common vulnerabilities that were attacked. Known common vulnerabilities is the way the bad guys got in. The second most was phishing, and the third most was related to credentials. So these are the basics that all of
and Adam, by the way, we've got a question that Adam, since you've got several I don't know if it's 20, 30 years of experience in cybersecurity education. There's a question from Joseph, and hopefully Pete will reconnect in just a second. I see it disconnected, I guess, to get us some better connection. But if you can answer the question from Joseph, what is the role of a standard university education in the world of hands-on hack training? I'm trying to see if I'm getting this right.
Hi,
Hey,
sorry
hi,
about that.
welcome back, Pete. No problem. We're all here. Nobody
Good.
left, and
Good,
we've
it
got
crashed. Sorry.
we've actually got a couple of questions from the audience. So I'll break and just give you those two. One I'm not sure is a bit general, but maybe you understand it. What is the role of standard university education in the world of hands-on hack training? So first of all, I wonder if hack training is what we're trying to teach. That's another question I have, by the way. Or is it more like defensive training? But how do you envision? We've been talking, Joseph, I don't know if you've been to our series of Cyber Sensei classes. We're talking about the roles of the universities basically across our last 6 or 7 episodes. But Pete, your angle on the role of universities in education, are they doing the right thing? What should they be doing? And then there's another question from Joseph.
I think universities, at least from what I see, is that a lot of them are really focusing on hands-on. Maybe not for the right reasons, though. So while I completely think that hands-on is absolutely 100% the way to go, and I think it's really important, but I think too many universities are taking on the free stuff given to them by corporations and becoming very corporate centric on that free stuff. And I don't have to name them. You all know who they are. And they give you the PowerPoints, they give you the worksheets, the exams, everything. And then there's a series of certifications that go through it. And sure, if I was part of a marketing department for one of these big companies, absolutely, I would do that. I mean, that makes sense, right? Give it out there, get them trained on it, and then this is what they know. And 10 years down the line, when they're in a position to buy stuff, they're going to buy the things they know, the things that they study. Absolutely agree with that from a marketing point of view. Absolutely disagree with it from a university point of view. I think that is not the place for universities to be lazy. They have student teachers, they have help, they have professors, they have all sorts of research departments, things like that. They can do much better than that. And they're doing a real disservice when they're overly focusing on this corporate training. I mean, when I look at this, I see that some of these, obviously these are big companies and they sell expensive products, but most of these students are going to go out there and they're not going to work for those companies. They're not going to work for the big companies that can afford these products. Very few of them actually will. I would say probably 95% of them are going to end up at smaller SMEs, where they are the IT and security person and night manager and whatever, and they're going to end up doing multiple things. They're never going to see one of these big machines or these. They're never going to be able to afford that kind of thing. They're mostly going to be working with off-the-shelf products that you buy you buy online, and I think they're missing, because of that. University could be giving them that versatility. They could be knowing fundamentally how these things work, how they're configured, and have an idea so that it doesn't matter whether I get the big name brand or one of the off-the-shelf ones. I know how it works. Look, there's most of those big name firewalls I have never worked with, but I have a pretty good idea how they work because I can work with IP tables. I can work with NetFilter. So I kind of know what they're doing. I just have to learn the interface. And I think that's where universities should focus on, is operations. How do these things work? Not the interfaces, That's how I feel. And I'm probably going to get booed out of this, but
thanks. There's a couple more, but Adam, I'll let you. I know you have a couple more questions, and then we'll go back to the Q&A.
I have when we say a university, there's community college versus the four-year universities, and I have a slightly different take. Those that have the opportunity to go to a university, go to a boot camp and get a pure play cybersecurity degree and get focused on lots of hands-on experience from a good school, blah, blah, blah. they're most likely going to work in just three areas: the Department of Defense, or one of the three-letter agencies in America anyway. They're going to work for one of the three-letter agencies. They're going to, work for the government. They're going to work for a Fortune 500, a company that is big enough to have a dedicated cybersecurity team, or they're going to work for an MSSP, a managed security service provider. That's where over 85% of all the jobs in North America for pure play cybersecurity staff go. But the vast majority of IT people that are going to college for education, as Pete said, will go work for, like, one of my clients is a manufacturing company. They have 20 IT people. They have one cybersecurity person, and he doesn't have the time to be an expert in all these things. And so the network people and the application development and those even in procurement need to know enough about cybersecurity. Those who are doing managing their, D365 or their O365 environments, they need to know about security. But that's not all they need to know. And so it's the way they think about it, being a productive member of the team, which is really critical. But I see quite a diversion here in North America. But I also see many of them too hung up on leveraging, and I'll say the names, Pete, because I'm rude, crude, and socially offensive. But I'll mention the Palo Altos and the Ciscos and those, net academies and stuff. But anyway, the next question here, the basic areas of knowledge. Pete, I think you guys have spent 20 plus years obsessing about what those basic core areas of knowledge are. In your 14 points in your books. You want to rattle some of them off for Joseph?
Yeah, the question is, it's a question from the audience, just to share with the audience, what are the basic areas of knowledge needed? What is a computer? What is software? So what's the minimum level, whatever the prerequisites to enter such a program, from your perspective?
So I think obviously any kind of basic networking is required, and even being able to set up your own system, which requires hardware, software. You cannot be in cybersecurity. I'll arm wrestle whoever says you can in the field, actually in the trenches, and not know Linux. Yeah, so I think that's absolutely required. So being able to install Linux, run Linux, use Linux as a day-to-day thing, and all very important. Now, as you see, what I'm talking about mostly is operational stuff, which is things that you are doing and working with hands-on, and this is this is what they need to know. They need to know that when they go on a browser, what's actually happening behind it. You need to know your operations. And so if you don't want to go into heavy detail of networking, which is fine, they still should have an idea of what ports and protocols are. They don't have to memorize them all. That's not that required anymore. But you will memorize them because you'll work with them a lot, and you'll start knowing protocols. You'll be able to look at things on the wire. I know a lot of people, when they start working with things like Wireshark, they expect something like Matrix, like they're going to look at it, and that's how it looks to them, just this gibberish running down, right? And over time, they actually feel like they've leveled up because it starts to make sense to them, and they start to be able to grapple with it and organize it and do things with it. And this was something I wanted to tell you before with teaching students is this idea of leveling up. I think that's really important, that they have a clear idea how to get to the next stage, how to become a mini boss themselves, as they go on. But yes, operations is absolutely everything. So you're talking about being able to how to, fix their own laptop, set it up, run Linux, do some networking, understand why they're setting up DNS, and, whether it's the Wi-Fi or, all of that stuff. They should know what the subnet is and how to set that up. So that is your minimum. And then from there, we teach them basic analysis techniques. We teach them operational controls. So people say, I know SANS has a top 20 controls that includes training, things like that. No, we're talking about operational controls, things that affect what a threat can do to your system, or how you protect a system. So we teach them all of this kind of basic stuff. A lot of it you can find in the OSTEM itself. Without, depending how technical they want to go, they'll go there if that's what they're meant to do. But I think that's really where you want to go with it. You want them to be able to analyze I think, which is number one. And after analyze, be able to test things themselves, but that requires a certain technical skill level, more so than just knowledge. But it's really how things interoperate, how things work together.
Cool.
Being able to handle complexity. I don't know. Two things we absolutely teach, I think is really important that nobody really mentions. One is empathy. So we don't have them sign contracts because most of them are minors anyways, this ethics contract that I will only use this for good and all that. I mean, in the real world, you see how well that works even with the medical institutions, you know. I don't play that game. Instead, what we teach them is empathy. What are you doing? How does this affect your target? How does this affect others? Do you think that you can really get away with it? Do you really think that they can't see what you're doing? Do you see the tracks that you're leaving behind, the breadcrumbs, you know? And we want them to have that knowledge that they know how to catch others, which means they know themselves how to get caught, you know? And this comes down to the whole, are we teaching hacking? Depends on your definition of the term. But the idea here is that we do teach them how to defend, which means in order to do that, they have to know what the attacks are. And by teaching them the attacks, they also realize what it leaves behind, what it means. So I think empathy is so important that they understand the other side of the coin, that they understand why they're doing it, what they're doing it, why it matters. And the second thing is discretion. So part of the whole idea of having them come up with a hacker name and set up those social media accounts is discretion, so that they realize how hard it is to be private in the world today. And that what you put out there is out there forever. And if you deal with a client, and we see this problem with ChatGPT now, all these people who are posting and uploading things to it, you know, private documents, company documents that absolutely shouldn't be there. And this is the kind of thing that's really important, because especially as you go into cybersecurity, discretion is everything. You will, if you're a social media influencer and you talk about your jobs, if you go on the conference circuit and you start giving details about your jobs, you will lose those jobs. Nobody will touch you because you're working with dirty laundry every day. I have a team myself where we do a lot of stuff that really requires discretion. We work with organizations that need it. We work with we do a lot of evidence collection for law firms on court cases, and you can't spill anything about it or else you jeopardize everything. And young people who grow up in this influencer YouTuber world, they need to learn to be quiet, you know,
early.
Yeah. Well, we get a lot of questions, and this time we wanted to get to today on, you mentioned your cyber range, and we're speaking to a lot of institutions that are unsure and thinking about whether I should build my own or buy, and what are the considerations. What can you share from your experience? What are the factors that educators that are here in this session should consider when whether to buy a cyber range, whether they need a cyber range, and whether to buy one or to build one?
Well, I think I was talking about this when I crashed, when my actually it was Zoom that crashed. And then so having built it, I can tell you the building it is easy. Maintaining it and keeping it relevant is really hard. On top of that, you need data, which is hard to get. So you need, whether it's attack data, threat data, anything real world. And yes, there is free stuff out there that you can get, but you have to integrate it. You have to implement it. It's hard. Not impossible. I mean, if you have students who you want to, you know, make that their project and that they do that, that's actually what we do at LaSalle, but it's, you know, it's still it's nowhere near as good as a system as these commercial systems. And I think if you're you're a university and you're charging students, then you better give them something decent, to work with. They should have a decent platform at least. And I know there's all kinds of different platforms. Again, I know Cyberbit is one. There's another one that we work with as well besides Cyberbit, but there's also platforms for instance, SOC analysis. So I talked about that. It's one that I find useful.
I think the purpose is also, I think what I'm learning is that when you say the term cyber range, there's a lot of interpretations on what is the function of this product. Is it really like a hacking playground?
Can I tell you what I hate? Can I tell you what I hate about cyber ranges? How about we do that?
Yeah, let's do it.
I hate when they gamify washing dishes. I absolutely hate that. So here's a whole group of user accounts. I want you to restrict their permissions. And there's 36 of them. And I'm, one or two, okay, now I learned how to restrict permissions. And I need to go through all 36 of them in order to earn a little badge. And I'm thinking to myself, kill me now. This isn't hacking. This isn't cybersecurity. In a stretch it is, right? This is administration, user administration. And
that's exactly when you say, what's the purpose? Is it like that? Or, you can go, there's a spectrum. It can be, again, an area which is an air-gapped area where it can really break things or hacking to certain machines or an environment. It can also be an area where you can actually experience an attack from the start to finish, like a complete simulation. So there's a spectrum between, and that really depends on what you want to achieve. If it's, a simple set of boxes that, you can go and break things, maybe it's something you can go ahead and build, and you want to do some pen testing, some red teaming, and so on. When you start looking at what we find, if you start looking at blue teaming and looking more at the defensive side, here is where it's becoming a little bit more difficult to implement that on your own, because that's where you're starting to need some sort of an attack generation engine, and that's something that needs to be maintained. There needs to be a set of networks. Are you doing AWS? Are you doing an IP network, a GCP network, and attacks running within those networks? That's becoming more difficult if you really want to keep up to date and you want to have a ransomware attack or a supply chain attack and all of those examples. That's difficult to build on your own. If you're going for the simpler level, that's something you can probably go ahead and build.
Well, that comes down to relevance, right? So, if I'm running a university program and I want them to have access to AWS and Azure and all, they should have a broad idea and experience with all of these things. When they walk out, they should know what these latest technologies are, including the different AIs and this kind of stuff. And in order to do that, it's really hard to get them. It takes a lot of work to set that up. And if there's a platform that gives it to them, I think that's probably the better way to go. I think in these terms here, it comes down to making sure they can get as broad of an experience as possible. Now, when I'm old now, but when I was younger, we started in IT and networking, and we got experience to all of these new things as they came because they were all new. And so you did them. And now there's so many new things all at once. You need to give as broad of an experience so that they touch on these things, that they understand how they're similar, and say, okay, well, if I've worked with this, then I know this is how this works. And actually use that as the education and give them the hands-on, the experience to it. So I agree with you with that. I think threat hunting is another place where it's hard to do on your own. Not impossible, but being able to have the tools be safe, make sure that nobody unleashes malware in the classroom, that kind of thing. So there's definitely places where it's very beneficial.
Adam, I know we have 5 more minutes. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover and we missed? Adam?
Well, first of all, just shout out to the anonymous attendee here about what they're doing with the part-time instructor. We've talked about that a number of times in this podcast. Get the industry folks engaged, give them a way to get into the conversation, execute it, and then get out. And one of the things that I was asking Pete about earlier is, how do you assess the students? Because almost every college, every university has to have some normative way to assess, grade the students. And we can talk about whether or not that's the right thing to do in, some other podcast. But in today's world, that is a requirement. And it's such a heavy lift on the instructors if they have their own custom lab or range to run 25 or 30 students through it, and then have to go through each one and see where they did, how far they got, where they're thinking, go out off and assess and grade that. That's just and that's what killed me when I was teaching at the college and university level.
Adam, you can flip that on its head. You take the group project, right? Which everybody hates, and it's usually the one person who does most of the work, anyways. But you take the group project, and an instructor assesses the group project. How far it came along. Now, with something like this, you could actually have your projects. Give them a series of projects with a series of time that they need to be delivered. But the idea here is when they're presenting it to the class and what they've learned, everybody is learning from that. And again, you are not assessing specifically the project, but how much each member was engaged and what their roles were. Because, once they get out into the real world, to the field, I know university's real world, but it's also a microcosm. So what I'm saying is, once they actually get out there and they realize that group project, they are the group in the organization. Yeah. They are the one who has to do it all. And this is why it's important for them to have that experience. But it also makes it easier on an instructor to sort of evaluate how far along they've come.
Yeah, I used a similar technique with a workshop I was running in Bangkok a couple of weeks ago, where at the end of the week, we had one team teach the other team what they learned, and then that team had to defend it while this team had to defend the other side. So it's like learning offensive and defensive at the same time. You spend as much time proving yourself right and critical thinking, proving yourself wrong. What might not you know? And then you can tell if they get it. You can tell if they can understand the concepts and the arguments and be able to teach it back to the others. Plus, the students would quite often rather learn from each other than me anyway. But maybe that's just me. Hey, Pete, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think what's most interesting is that another thing that happens in universities, or should happen in universities, is giving them time to research things where you have to secure things. I mean, now they have time, right? How do you secure things that you can't secure with traditional stuff? And this happens all the time now. Every time there's a new technology, Web3 or now with AI, how do you secure something? And the only way you do that is by breaking it down operationally and seeing how you can secure it, because you can't just throw a firewall up. It doesn't work. You can't just do this traditional stuff. Universities should really embrace that, give them time to research the stuff that can't be easily done,
Yeah, good on you. Pete, I always end up with this question is, who else do you think we should interview? Who do you think has a nugget to share with this audience of cyber educators?
There's two people actually I would recommend. One is a guy I work with in AI, very smart. And his name is Mark, and I'll get you his information. But AI, he can talk about AI. He's been in it since the 80s. So, I mean, he's got a long career. I think he's very interesting. He's worked for universities, for military, for everything. I think he can really shed light on what to do with AI in universities today. And the other, Dave, I have to introduce you to, is he works in the finance sector. Specifically, he's sort of a champion for retail investors and how the banks are killing the stock market, that kind of thing. But he did a talk with me on hacking the stock market years ago. We did a talk together. And if anybody can talk about technology, and he's also on the AI ethics board, I think, in Canada. But from the financial world view, and I mean, they work with AI, they work with IT, they work with high speed stuff. He brought me in on back when I did the audit, the analysis for IEX trading in New York, when they first built up that stock exchange. So he's a really interesting person to talk about, because that's a whole aspect that I think doesn't even get touched on in university, not even in the finance department.
Well, speaking of AI, I sent Shahar here a link, a YouTube video that just came out about maybe just 6 weeks ago. It's the best summary I've ever seen on the power of these large language models, ChatGPT and others, and the danger of them. It is by two absolute rock stars in this industry. You know, I've made it mandatory watching for my family even, and all the participants here are going to see it. So that's a really powerful, scary video. Go ahead.
ChatGPT is sort of, or these AI, these large language models coming out now, they're sort of the fast food of AI, I have to say. And with all the danger that fast food brought with it, all the conveniences and all the dangers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they tie it back like the Oppenheimer, the letter he wrote to the leaders of this world around the nuclear bomb. But, one scary thing in there, they said they interviewed 50% of the top, I forget what it was, like 200 AI researchers in the world. And they said there was a 10% chance that it essentially leads to the downfall of all we know in this world. But anyway, leaving on a happier note, hey, Pete, thank you so much for introducing this audience to Hacker High School, the exercises about the light bulb with the string, the 14 lessons, the free material that you and your team have spent the last 20 years giving back to this industry. I hope some future time we can go more into the lessons, the teachable points of view you have through OSTEM and ISACOM, especially OSTEM to this market. I think that's an underutilized resource in the colleges. I hope this audience will go look at that material. But thanks for all you've done for this industry. Thanks for being on this podcast, and thanks for what you've helped me with personally. I really appreciate it.
Just to throw this out there, OSTEM's only underutilized in the United States. It's
that's
heavily used everywhere else. So
thanks for correcting me.
Yeah, no, that's the problem though. And I would love to see the US actually step up and focus more on this kind of thing. So, thank you so much.
I want to thank you both, Pete and Adam. I want to thank the audience. I also want to give a quick shout out. We just finished our recent Collegiate International Cyber League, ICL. I don't know if any of you in the audience have participated. If not, you're encouraged to come next time. We've got some massive prizes there. We've just concluded one a few weeks ago, and I want to congratulate Warwick University, who came in first place, UCF, University of Central Florida, second, TAFE Queensland, third place, and Embry-Riddle that came fourth place. So very well done. So congrats to those winners. And again, I want to thank our hosts, the audience. The recording can be found on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcast, YouTube, the Cyberbit YouTube channel, and our website. Just search for Cyber Sensei Cyberbit and you'll find it. And future episodes will be promoted on the Cyberbit LinkedIn page. So just follow us if you want to receive more updates about the future episodes. And of course, feel free to reach out to Adam, to Peter, to myself on LinkedIn or through Cyberbit, and we'll make sure to connect. Thank you very much, and see you on our next episode, which will most likely be from the NICE Cybersecurity conference. So if you're there, come and visit. If not, listen to the recording. Thanks very much.
Thank you,
everybody.
Bye.